In a world filled with questions, where wisdom knows no boundaries, join us on a journey of enlightenment and endless learning. Eternal Teachings. TV. Discover the eternal.
The United Nations Security Council, or UNSC, was established in 1945 to prevent future global conflicts. The horrors of 2 world wars fueled a collective desire for lasting peace. The founding members, scarred by the devastation, sought to create a mechanism for international cooperation and conflict resolution. The UNSC, with its unique mandate, emerged as the embodiment of this aspiration. The 5 victorious powers of World War II, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, the Soviet Union, and the Republic of China, secured permanent seats on the Council. These permanent members, known as the P5, were granted veto power over substantive resolutions. This power dynamic, while understandable in the context of 1945, has become increasingly contested in the 21st century. Calls for reform have grown louder, demanding a more inclusive and representative UNSC. The veto power, enshrined in Article 27 of the UN Charter, grants each permanent member the authority to block any substantive resolution. This power was intended to ensure that the UNSC's decisions had the full backing of the most powerful nations. However, the veto has also been a source of considerable controversy. Critics argue that it has been used to protect national interests at the expense of global peace and security. The Cold War saw numerous instances of the US and the Soviet Union using their vetoes to block resolutions against each other's allies. This practice, known as veto politics, often paralyzed the UNSC, rendering it ineffective in addressing critical global challenges. The use of the veto has increasingly been criticized for obstructing action on humanitarian crises and human rights violations. The UNSC's composition, largely unchanged since 1945, has been subject to mounting criticism. The world has undergone a dramatic transformation in the decades since the UN's founding. The rise of new powers and the growing influence of regional blocs demand a more representative and responsive UNSC. The developing world, representing the vast majority of UN member states, lacks adequate representation on the Council. This imbalance of power undermines the legitimacy and effectiveness of the UNSC. A reformed UNSC, more attuned to the voices and concerns of the developing world, would be better equipped to address the complex challenges facing the international community. The demand for UNSC reform is rooted in the principle of sovereign equality enshrined in the UN Charter. All nations, regardless of size or power, have an equal right to participate in shaping the international order. The developing world, comprising over 80% of UN member states, argues that its voice is not adequately heard in the current structure of the UNSC. The lack of representation has tangible consequences. Decisions made without the input of those most affected are often ill-suited to address the root causes of conflicts and crises. The G4 nations, Brazil, Germany, India, and Japan, have been at the forefront of these efforts, advocating for their permanent membership. The African Union has also been vocal in demanding greater representation for the African continent. The ongoing conflicts in Syria and Yemen provide stark illustrations of the veto power's potential to hinder effective UN action. In Syria, the conflict, which began in 2011, has resulted in a catastrophic humanitarian crisis. Millions have been displaced and countless lives lost. The UNSC, however, has been largely paralyzed by vetoes from Russia and China, which have shielded the Syrian government from meaningful accountability. In Yemen, a brutal civil war has raged since 2014, pushing the country to the brink of famine. The UNSC, while expressing concern, has been unable to take decisive action due to the threat of vetoes. These cases highlight the urgent need for UNSC reform. Numerous proposals have been put forth to reform the UNSC. These proposals aim to address the Council's perceived democratic deficit, enhance its effectiveness, and make it more representative of the contemporary world. One of the most common proposals involves expanding the Council's membership. Proponents of expansion argue that adding new permanent and non-permanent members would make the Council more representative of the world's regions and enhance its legitimacy. The G4 nations, along with South Africa, have been strong advocates for such reforms. However, expanding the Council's membership is not without its challenges. Determining which countries should be granted permanent seats and negotiating the complex power dynamics within an enlarged Council remain significant hurdles. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, represent a formidable force in contemporary international relations. These emerging economies, with their growing political and economic clout, have been increasingly vocal in demanding a greater role in global governance. The BRICS nations have been critical of the UNSC's current structure, arguing that it does not reflect the realities of a changed world. They have called for a more representative and equitable council, one that gives greater voice to developing countries. However, their positions on the specifics of reform are not always aligned. Brazil, India, and South Africa have been more vocal in demanding permanent seats for themselves and other developing countries. Reforming the UNSC is a Herculean task. It requires navigating complex geopolitical interests, overcoming historical mistrust, and building consensus among a diverse group of nations. The permanent members, while acknowledging the need for some reform, are reluctant to relinquish their privileged positions. Developing countries, eager for greater representation, face the challenge of uniting behind a common set of proposals. Despite the challenges, the pursuit of UNSC reform is essential. A more representative and effective council is crucial for addressing the myriad challenges facing the international community. The path to reform, while arduous, is not insurmountable. A reformed UNSC holds the promise of a more just and equitable world order. A council that reflects the diversity of the international community would be better equipped to address the root causes of conflict, promote sustainable development, and uphold human rights. Greater representation for developing countries would ensure that their voices are heard, their interests considered, and their perspectives incorporated into decision-making processes. A more inclusive UNSC would enhance the legitimacy and effectiveness of the UN as a whole. Decisions made with the support of a broader range of countries are more likely to be implemented and respected. The reform of the UNSC is not merely a procedural matter, it is a moral imperative. The debate over UNSC reform is ultimately a debate about the future of global governance. The world is facing unprecedented challenges that require collective action and a renewed commitment to multilateralism. The UN, with its universal membership and comprehensive mandate, remains the best forum for addressing these challenges. However, for the UN to remain relevant and effective in the 21st century, it must adapt to a changing world. The reform of the UNSC is a crucial step in this process of adaptation. A more representative, transparent, and accountable council would strengthen the UN's legitimacy and enhance its capacity to address global challenges. The future of the UN, and indeed the future of humanity, depends on our ability to create a more just, equitable, and effective system of global governance.